everyone. Tess Thomas here from Clay County Historical and Arts Council. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Go to Jail. Today I am in the home of Kathy and Melvin Cantrell, who is a retired captain from the Clay County Sheriff's Office. Melvin, thank you so much for having us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and tell us a little bit about your life here.
I appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
Thanks. So let's just start when you were born and tell us about your family and the area, how you got to Clay County.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1957 in the old Murphy General Hospital in Murphy, and was brought home to about 200 yards from here. This is our neighbor's property where I grew up. I grew up playing right here where we're talking, and cutting hay and climbing the trees and playing cowboys and Indians, and this was just where I grew up at.
Yeah.
Not 200 yards from my childhood home.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is that home still standing? Is it still here?
Yes.
Yeah.
My sister and I own it now. My mother passed away in 2014, and she and I bought the property from our other sister and her brother, and so now she and I own it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, Green Cove here is named after my relative. My great-great-grandmother was a Green, and it's my understanding that the Greens were the first in the community. A lot of their property, if not all of it, was actually they got from the Harshaws, who was the first landowners. And so the Green Cove here was mostly owned by Greens. And
that's the name.
And my grandfather was Oscar Cantrell, and he worked at the folk school for 50 years. And
impressive.
I was trying to beat his record with the sheriff's department, but it didn't quite beat it.
Didn't quite beat it.
Yeah. But
what was your grandfather's name?
Oscar Cantrell.
And your grandmother?
Murray.
Mary?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's my sister's name, one of my sister's names. And the other is Judy Ellison. She passed away about 2014 or 2015. And my brother Ed Cantrell, him and his son have a body shop there in Hayesville, Cantrell's Body Shop.
Oh, okay.
And my other sister, Mary Payne, lives over on Settlewig. They've got the airport where you all the time seeing planes coming and going.
Right.
That's them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no commercial planes. That's just little private planes coming in and out?
Yeah, it's private planes, yeah.
Wow.
My brother-in-law actually builds planes.
Really?
Yeah, and sells them, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that'd be the good guy to have the airport then.
Yeah.
So he can testify.
Yeah, if it tears up, he can fix it.
So let's go a little fast forward, and so you grew up here, and then where'd you go to school?
Elementary school, went to Ogden School. Do you know where Ogden School's at?
I do not.
Okay. It's on Old 64 here at Brasstown, like you're going toward Warren.
Okay.
It's a big, huge building there on the right. You can't miss it if you go up the road. It's in private hands now, and I don't know what they're doing with it. They've put new windows in it and a lot of work going on there, but I don't know what they're going to do.
So not sure if it's going to be a school again or...
No, it's not going to be a school again.
No.
There's been talk at times that somebody's going to put a restaurant in there. And it started out as IOI after it quit becoming a school, and that's where IOI is at Marble now, and they hire handicapped people and they have jobs, and that's IOI went in there first, and then they outgrew it and then went to Marble, and so I think it's changed hands a couple of times since then. I don't even know who owns it now, but I don't know what they're going to do with it.
Right, they're not telling anyone.
I don't know that they care, if you stopped in there and asked them. If I've thought about doing that, but they might might tell me to mind my own business.
Well,
Mom.
still, we get curious. We want to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So if anybody knows what that's going to be, y'all let us know, okay? In the comments.
And then I went to Hayesville School. They moved us to Hayesville a little bit early because in the 7th grade, there were only 6 of us.
Oh, wow.
And so they gave us the option to go to Hayesville. And we took it, and I've regretted it ever since, that we should have stayed there through the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then about 2 or 3 years after we went to Hayesville, they closed down Ogden School, I think around 1974 or so.
What was it about Ogden School that you liked better than the Hayesville
Well,
School?
it was just a little old country school.
Was it the smaller classes, or you had
Yeah.
nicer teacher, or
Yeah.
because you knew everyone?
Some of the teachers, well, not some, all the teachers had 2 grades.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah.
Because the classes were so small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had like the 1st and the 2nd grade, and then another teacher had the 2nd and the 3rd grade. It was divided the 2nd grade, and then you had a teacher that had the 4th and the 5th, and so on. It went through the 8th grade until we got there, and we were so small they just, like I say, moved us to Hayesville. I went to Hayesville and graduated in 1977, and came out and worked various jobs while I was going to Tri-County. Worked at Townsend Funeral Home, worked for my brother in the body shop, and taught GED classes at Tri-County.
So wait, what did you do at the funeral home?
Wash cars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wash cars.
And what was the second one you said? You worked for your brother?
In the body shop, a little bit of everything, sanding and priming was mostly my job, and taking cars apart and helping put them back together.
That's a great knowledge to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I worked for my brother, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. But anyway, when I finished at Tri-County, then I transferred to Western. And when I quit Western, I had 30 hours left. I was wanting to be a driver's ed teacher, is what I was going to school for. And so I got offered a job at the Sheriff's Department.
So wait, you said teaching for GEDs, is that what it was?
At Tri-County, yeah.
Okay, before
Yeah.
you went to Western. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, and so what did you study at Western to be?
I was just taking general college courses.
Okay.
Get a BS in education. And then I was going to have to go even longer. You had to go longer to teach driver's ed than you did to teach math or something else.
You're kidding.
No, it was a whole special
Well,
thing.
a lot of safety.
Yeah, I
training,
guess.
I bet.
I never got far enough to have to do it. When I quit Western, I liked having 30 hours of having my BS degree there. And came back to Clay County and started with the Sheriff's Department. And law enforcement was always my dream. I never dreamed that I'd actually be able to do it,
Yeah.
but that's what I wanted.
Why did you think you wouldn't be able to?
Well, I think a lot of people, just have dreams and they think they're unrealistic or whatever.
Right.
And so I guess that it was just too good to be true, I guess.
I see.
Is what I'm
So who
saying.
offered you the job?
Howard Barnard.
Okay.
He had won the sheriff in 1982 and asked me if I wanted to go work for him in the jail as a jailer and dispatcher. And when I did it, it was called jailer, and now they call them detention officers.
Right.
But the jailer and dispatcher then had both duties. A jailer, dispatcher had to check on the prisoners and feed them and make sure they got their medicine and make sure they were safe.
And at that point, you were across the street from the Old Jail Museum in that building, right?
Yeah.
And so how many cells were in there? How many prisoners could you hold?
We could, if we was full, we could hold about 25, 26.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I hated to see them close that jail down and build a new one. I guess it was a necessary thing, but I hate to see them close it down.
Why's that?
Well, I don't know. I'm one of them people that don't like change.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't like change.
I understand.
And we really had a good setup there, and good safe set up. And you know, while I was jailing there, we never actually had but one prisoner to die on us.
How did that happen?
Well, he was a Lumbee Indian, and he got caught by the troopers coming through the county for drunk driving. And I reckon he had enough drunk drivings that the judge gave him like 6 months in Clay County Jail.
Repeat offender.
Yeah, and this guy was so talented, you just can't believe how musically talented he was. He said he knew over 1,000 songs.
Wow.
And we would let him out, and he'd come in the kitchen on a Friday or Saturday night, and the sheriff and me or whoever would sit around, and we'd say, sing, and then we'd name a song, and he'd play the guitar, and he just sounded professional. He was just so good. And so they were having a benefit for a man that had brain cancer over at the school at the auditorium, and this guy had had a toothache, and I had taken him to the dentist, and he'd give him some antibiotics and wouldn't pull the tooth, I don't think, until, you know.
Yeah, the infection's gone.
The infection. And so brought him back to the jail, and they were having that benefit, and he wanted to go to it. And so, even though he didn't feel good. So the sheriff and I took him over, Tony Woody, we took him over to the auditorium, and the sheriff and I are sitting on the very back row. And it come time for this man to sing, and the Hogsett brothers had already sung How Great Thou Art. And when he came up, he said, I hope they don't mind, but I'm going to do that song again because I've had several people to request me to do it, and I'd like to do it again if they don't mind. So they nodded that it was okay. And he got up there, and he done the most beautiful job you have ever seen. Except he, normally when he was singing, he would look at you. He wasn't looking at us that night. He was looking up like at the corner of the room. And when he finished the last word on that song of How Great Thou Art, he took one more strum on the guitar, and he just fell like a tree. And I jumped up, and I ran up to the stage, and he was dead.
Oh my gosh.
And we had EMS and everybody there.
Right close,
this.
yeah.
I mean, they were there. And
There was no saving him.
There was no saving him.
Do you remember his name?
No, I don't remember his name.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but he was.
Oh, wow.
I talked to him a lot, and he's just a great guy. And he was when he got out of jail, he wanted to go to Myrtle Beach down there. He had performed there before, and he was going to go back to Myrtle Beach. And he said you can make a lot of money doing that, you know. And that's what he was going to do.
If any of you people out there listening to us recognize this story, and you know who the Lumbee Indian gentleman that Mr. Melvin is talking about, would you please let us know? Because I would love to reach out to his family and recognize him. So, so at this point, you're already a deputy sheriff?
I am.
So what did you have to do for training? I always wondered, like, what kind of training you have to go through. Is it got to be physical and educational and different situations you got to be ready for?
We do. It's changed from when I went through. It was 440 hours, and I think it's like 600 and something hours.
Oh, wow.
Now. And we had to drive to Silva every day, and there was like 4 or 5 or 6 of us that we'd take 2 cars out there and drive to Silva, and that was where the classrooms was at there at I can't remember the name of the school now, Southwestern Tech.
Okay.
Southwestern Tech, and in some of our classes we'd actually come back to Franklin, and our driving classes we went to Bryson City to an old airport out there.
They had you scattered everywhere for training.
Yeah, they did, and we had to do jail searches, and that was in Cherokee County. We went to Cherokee County Jail and did the jail search.
Searching the cells and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to learn what to look for. And
yeah. And our courtroom, we actually used the courtroom in Cherokee County. And today, I don't really know what places they use. They have a BLET class at Tri-County now. And so if I were taking it today, I just have to drive 3 or 4 miles down the road to Tri-County.
What do you call it? BLET?
BLET, Basic Law Enforcement Educational.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
How long did that take
It-
to finish?
4 months, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense.
It was, yeah. 4 months. And then at that time, that's all you had to do other than you had to shoot every year, and you still have to shoot every year on the qualifying.
To qualify in your
Yeah.
pistol and
Once a year.
yeah.
It's not enough. They need to do it 2 or 3 times a year, but once a year is what they require. And now you've got to do, I think it's 24 hours of in-service every year to keep your certification. And that was something that come along a lot later, like around in the 2000s, you know,
Yeah.
2005 or 2006, somewhere through there.
Well, so you were deputy sheriff, and then eventually you got. Sorry, I was looking at your notes. Eventually, you got promoted,
Uh-huh.
right, and made captain. Is that right?
Well,
How'd that go?
It did. When I was a road officer for years, and at that starting out, the sheriff's department didn't have any investigators, and so if I got called to go to almost any scene, you know, breaking and entering or whatever, then since we had no investigators, it was solely my responsibility to investigate it. And it was every other road officer's.
So and now it would be road officer would be taking care of traffic and stuff
Well,
like
no,
that.
not
Driving.
necessarily. When I was captain, I still made road officers participate in it because it's a learning process, and if they don't participate in it, learn, then they're never ready to be an investigator.
Sure.
And I was a road officer, and the only specialized crime in the sheriff's department, really, that I did was I did all the sexual abuse and physical abuse investigations.
That's hard. to
Yeah,
see every
if
day.
there was a sexual abuse or something came in, physical abuse, you know, they'd call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, even though I was just a road officer, I'd have to go investigate it. And a lot of that required traveling out of the county, and, you know, investigators have to go out of the county a lot. And so when I was doing a crime like that, you know, it wasn't uncommon for me to have to go to Asheville, or go to Murphy or Towns County or wherever. I had to go to Asheville a lot for the polygraphs. I used the polygraph a lot, and I believed in it. Polygraph helped me solve a lot of crimes.
Yeah, because you don't realize what your body is saying that your lips
Yeah,
are not.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I used it in cases where I knew the person was guilty in my heart, but I couldn't get a confession, and so I would use the polygraph as a tool getting a confession.
And that was admissible in court. Is it still today?
No, it's not. The confession is.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you use the polygraph and see, that, okay, this spiked when I mentioned whatever, so that gave him a response. And so, or
Well,
her.
I didn't give the polygraph. There was a polygraph examiner
I see.
with the SBI, and I would be in another room watching it on a closed circuit TV.
Okay.
And when I would take the person in, they would be put into a room, and I would go in and I'd tell the polygraph examiner, you know, what my case was about and what I wanted to know. And then he would set the questions up from that. And on the polygraph, there's never more than 1 or 2 questions pertaining to the crime. And the rest of the questions are like your name is, you were born on.
They call that like a baseline or something, so they can see.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that if you intentionally tell a lie, the polygraph would pick that up. And
Well,
then
I'm
you
not
say
going to
your
go
name
into
for
it
sure.
too deep because
Well, right, that's true.
I don't want people
That's true.
knowing what they're doing
That's
in
true.
trying to beat it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And why don't they allow it to be admissible in court any longer?
Well, it's just not a, it's not a proven science, I guess.
Huh.
You know, and I had one polygraph for a guy that was, they said that he had molested his son. His son said it, and he said he didn't. And so I took the son first for a polygraph. He was old enough that they would give him one. He was like 14 years old. And it said he was telling the truth. And so I came back and I confronted the father with the results of the polygraph, and he still wouldn't confess. And I said, well, will you take the polygraph? And he said, yeah. And so I took him out there, and it said he's telling the truth. That's the only time I ever had that happen.
Wow.
Yeah. Both of them showed to be telling the truth. So I ended up, I didn't solve the case. And
darn it. It's got to be memorable that they had that one case that you couldn't solve.
Yeah, and the polygraph examiners didn't understand it either. You know, and there's different theories out there on how you can beat a polygraph. You know, like holding a penny under your tongue, or putting a thumbtack in your shoe.
I've heard the thumbtack in your shoe one, yeah.
Pressing your toe against it, and different things like that.
So because of that, that's why it's not allowed anymore, probably, because somebody found ways
I
to
don't know
manipulate
that
it.
works, and I don't know that I ever had anybody try it. I think I had people that would really take a lot of Valiums or something before they would
Oh,
go
right.
in an effort
To affect
be,
it.
Yeah.
I know you can tell by their pupils and your heart rate and whether or not your hands are getting clammy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different telltale signs, but it's just fascinating to me to hear about it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get you to tell any secrets.
Well, when they hook you up to the polygraph, they hook you to a thing that shows your heartbeats. And there's a thing that goes around the chest that shows how many breaths you're taking. And then the thing that they hook to your finger that looks like the thing that they take your temperature with.
Like at the hospital, it tells your blood oxygen.
Looks just like it.
Yeah.
And
okay.
it is taking what they call the galvanic response. And when you tell a lie according to the polygraph examiners, you secrete something that you don't when you're telling the truth.
Really?
Yeah.
Secrete, like comes out of your skin?
Yeah, like oil or something like that.
Wow.
Like an oil. And it's looking for stuff like that.
Huh.
And so what they would do when they would take someone in for the polygraph, they would tell them what the questions was going to be ahead of time. After they talked to the person about the case, and the person's denying it, and they say, okay, this is going to be the question. Did you break into that house at Brasstown? And then there might be one more question about the crime. And then the rest of the questions would be, your name is, and one of the questions was always, are you absolutely convinced that I will not ask you a question other than the questions we've discussed? And then there would be a question about whether they wanted the person to lie, so they could see what the lie looked like on the polygraph.
Right.
It's a little more complicated than
Right.
that. They want the person to tell the lie believing that they're believing the lie. I guess it's...
That's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I use the polygraph a lot, and man, I love the polygraph. And most other officers didn't rely on the polygraph like I did. And I think they were missing a golden opportunity.
A good tool.
By not doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I got a lot of confessions from people that I couldn't get confessions from, that once they failed that polygraph and he looked at them and said, you failed. Now let's
see what's really going on. Yeah, what really happened.
Yeah, and most of the time people would confess like that.
Well, it's got to get almost depressing having, to deal with crime every day on a daily basis. How did you guys keep your spirits up? I understand that one of your sheriffs was quite a card. At least
Oh,
he had
he was a card,
some fun
yeah.
stuff to happen at work too.
Tony kept things going there at the sheriff's department. Tony hated thieves more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. He hated thieves, and when we'd come in the morning, the first thing he'd do is open up the computer and look at all the reports from the night before and the day before. And if they was any breaking and enters on it, he'd just go wild. We have got to solve them, and he'd go wild. And we solved way over 90% of the crime.
Wow, that's good.
Breaking and entering and stuff like that in Clay County. And Tony just had a sixth sense on who done it. You know, if it was in Brasstown, he'd know, well, this one's good to look at, and if it's in Shooting Creek, he'd know that one's good to look at. And back then, crime was such in Clay County that you'd have one or two or three or four all in the same group breaking in and stuff. And you know, you'd come in and the computer would just be full of breaking and enters. And once you solved one breaking and enter, you solved them all.
Just
and
because it's basically always the same people doing
yeah.
it, yeah.
And it would totally stop our breaking and enterings for 6 or 8 months or a year until somebody else would take it up and they'd start again. And then, you know, sometimes it'd take us a month or so to catch them, but we always caught them. And that's one thing that Tony really worked on, was the breaking and enters. He just hated thieves, worse than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And then we had, of course, the sex crimes, and we had a lot of it. One time, Debbie Money, who's now the county manager, and I worked together. She worked for DSS, the Child Protective Agent, and we worked together really good. And one time we'd had a child molesting crime to come in, and she and I went out, and I ended up locking the person up. And then she got back to her office, and she had another allegation, and we went out and investigated it and locked that one up. And so we'd locked up like 2 or 3 in 1 week. And
wow.
Tony called us both in, and he looked at Debbie and he said, "Debbie," he said, "I believe you and Mel has locked up everybody in Clay County. I'm worried you're going to get me next." And Debbie still laughs about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of funny.
Well, if you stay out of trouble, you won't be locked up. There you go.
But anyway, that was kind of a little something funny about Tony. And Tony just he had the funniest ways, you know, and he could just make it. He's like Johnny Carson.
Really?
Yeah, he was like Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
He could just make you laugh. And people loved to come up there for that. We used to get together with all the sheriffs from Clarksville, Georgia, and Blue Ridge, and Townsend, Union County, and Cherokee County, and Fannin County, and Swain County. They'd be about 10 or 12 sheriffs come every Friday, and we'd eat lunch, usually at Daniel's Steakhouse. And most of them come to see what Tony's going to do next.
Right.
But we solved a lot of crime doing that. We solved a lot of crime because they would talk about crime that they were having in their counties, and a lot of the times our criminals was their criminals. So
as long as y'all just collaborated and give each other
Yeah,
details, it'd
yeah.
be like, that sounds exactly like the same guy.
Well, I know one time the sheriff from Clarksville, he's talking about he's having trouble with this someone that was breaking into cars at church and stealing pocketbooks.
At church?
At church.
Wow, gutsy.
And I said, you know, we had that same thing, and I solved it. And I told him the guy's name, and he gets the weirdest look on the face, and he said, well, that's one of our suspects. And so he went back and told them, and I've got a confession out of the guy.
Yeah.
And he went back and told his investigators what I told him, and they went to work on it, and they solved it. It was that guy.
Same fella.
Same guy. And that's Clarksville, Georgia.
Yeah, he thought he went far enough away where
Yeah.
nobody down there would know.
And if we hadn't been eating together, they might not have ever solved the crime.
Right.
You know, and that's just a big help if you can talk to all your neighbors and find out what they've got going on, who their suspects are, because their suspects may be your suspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any kind of funny practical jokes that you remember that you want to share?
Well, I don't know that I can share them or not. You know,
Well, we do want to be a family.
yeah,
You know, kids can watch it, so we try not to cuss or
Yeah.
say things like that. But we like to hear the fun. We want to laugh too.
yeah. Well, we just nothing really comes to mind. I mean, yes, there was lots of practical jokes, and I know. Well, one practical joke, uh, we pepper sprayed. We had this female that she is always playing jokes, and so when she first come in, the first thing she'd do is hit the commode. We pepper sprayed the lid of the commode.
Oh no! Oh, ow!
and stuff like that, you know.
She may have stopped doing the practical jokes after that one.
Yeah, yeah. We had another guy that was a deputy, and he must have had prostate trouble because he'd have to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. And he was the town deputy, and he'd come running into the jail and run to the commode, you know. And so one time I locked the door like somebody's in there.
Oh no!
Yeah, and he stood there and he'd shift from his weight from one leg to the other before I finally told him that I'd locked the door and wasn't nobody in there. And stuff like that. You know.
Yeah, just trying to keep your spirits up during the day.
Yeah.
Make the time go by. What about? I understand that there was a lot of moonshiners back in the day in Clay County. Did you have any chance to go
I
bust
busted,
any of them?
Yeah, I busted one steel. And there's a picture of me that the Historical Society has there of me standing next to the steel. It was way up on Tusquety, and we were getting complaints about it. And so the sheriff got me, and there's another deputy, Hillis Davis, went up there with us, and a deputy from Cherokee County. And so the sheriff wanted to make sure that the steel was going to be there, and he had me crawl up the branch about 100 yards. And the branch was growed over, and it's getting down late in the afternoon, and I was just absolutely scared to death a big snake was going to fall off on me, because I'd have died if it had. And I crawled up that branch, and I finally got next to the steel, and you could smell the steel before you could see it. And
Smell.
yeah, the ferment in corn.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It's a good smell.
How far away can you smell it?
Well, it just depends on how
Strong it is.
strong it is.
Right,
Well,
right.
it depends on the wind.
Sure.
You know, if
Right.
it's blowing your way. I don't know how far you could smell.
How far were you when you smelled it?
Oh, I wasn't, but maybe from here to my stove, not far, about 20 or 30 feet.
Okay.
Um,
Still, that's a long ways to be able to smell something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got close enough that I could see the steel. And so I crawled back down the branch and got to where the sheriff was at, and I told him it was up there. And I told him, I said, you know, we've come to bust a steel, and not one of us has a camera. This is way before cell phones.
Sure, yeah.
and we were so far out, all we had was a walkie-talkie, and it didn't work. You know, you couldn't reach nobody. And he said, you're right. He said, why don't you go back to town and get a camera? I said, okay. And so I said, you know, just wait here, and I'll be back as soon as I can. And so I run to town, and while I was going to town, I thought, well, I'll just stop and get Fran Fuller. She's got a camera. She's the editor of the Clay County Progress, and be a good story. And so I run by Fran's house and told her what's going on, and she's just up to go.
She just grabbed her
Oh,
camera
yeah,
and jumped
grabbed
in.
her camera, and let's go. And we got in the truck and
That's brave.
started up there, and Fran started running things through her mind. And I was playing with her, you know, aggravating her, you know, you was talking about playing jokes on
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Well, I was doing that to Fran.
Round her up.
Yeah. And so we started up there, and she says, well, what are we going to do? And I said, well, Fran, I said, unless you want to crawl back down that branch and it's dark and take a chance of a big cottonmouth falling on your back, I said, I think we'll just pull up in the yard. And she says, well, what if they shoot at us? I said, well, I'll shoot back at them. I got a gun. And so all this was not at once, you know. We'd drive for another mile or two, and she'd ask another question.
Okay.
And so by the time we got there, she said, well, why don't you let me out here where I can see the house, and you go on down. And I said, okay. And she said, you think that'll be all right? And I said, yeah. I said, but watch for bears. There's bears up here. And there really was bears up in there.
Right.
And,
but you just brought it up to make her think about it.
She said, well, you think one might get me? And I said, well, if it sees you, it will.
Oh, no.
And she started crying.
Oh, darn it, Melvin.
Yeah. And so I pulled up, and the old man was sitting on the porch, and I got out, and I told him who I was, and I said, I'm here to bust your steel. And he said, well, I don't have a steel. And I said, well, that's a funny thing to me. I said, the sheriff's at it right now. I said, let's walk around behind your house. And so we did. The steel's back there.
Yeah.
And we ended up, busting the steel. And we brought it back to town. And Fran got her article, and she didn't get eaten by a bear, and she didn't get shot by the man. And
well, I know that's probably funnier to us than it was to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, just sorry to laugh at your expense, honey. But that's kind of funny. So that was the only still that you had?
That's the only one I ever participated in, yeah. I was going to tell you another story that popped up, and I think I've got part-timers.
Happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Oh, we had another editor of the paper, Lonnie Britt. And Lonnie died while he was editor, but he was always kidding around with us. And he'd go out with us and ride. And so Doris Waters had stopped the car, and it had a big bag of marijuana in it. And Tony decided that would be a good story for the paper. And he called Lonnie, and he come down, and they got the marijuana laid out on the hood of the patrol car. And both of them, it looks like they're looking at it, you know. Lonnie takes her a picture. And so when the paper came out, he made a special paper for the sheriff's department. And it's got like little captions above their heads, like a cartoon, and
right.
them talking.
Yeah.
He'd done that, and Doris was saying, this is sure going to look good come election time, Sheriff. And Tony is saying, shut up, Doris, can't you see I'm posing?
But that was not the real paper.
No, it wasn't the real paper.
But he brought it to the sheriff like it was.
Well, he brought a bunch of copies. He must have brought 20 copies to the sheriff's department.
So to make him think it was really in the paper?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. So back then, you know, a lot of people were just into playing jokes on each other, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, we weren't, we did too. So.
Yeah, I think that was a generational thing, you know.
Yeah.
People have lost their sense of humor nowadays.
Yeah.
They
Well,
get hurt too easily.
Our sheriff now, Mark Buchanan, he played a pretty bad joke on me one time. Like I say, we'd all go and eat on Friday, and he was the SBI at that time. He was our agent, and he'd always go to eat with us. And so one Friday, a lot of times I just had to count my change to have enough to eat, because I, you know, just barely made it. Never had no money. And so I'd counted my change up, and I went in there, and I'd ordered me a hamburger, fries, and a Coke, and I'm sitting there eating it, and Mark had went through the buffet, and he picked up a dessert, and he brought in there, and he set the dessert down, and then all of a sudden he looks weird, and he says, I don't know why I got that. I don't even like it. He said, you want that, Melvin? I said, yeah, I'll eat it. So he slides it over, and I ate the dessert. And he made sure that he was behind me when we was paying. And so I got up there, and they never gave us a ticket. You just tell them what you had.
Right.
I said, I had a hamburger and a Coke and fries. And Mark says, and Patricia Hooker, she's adding it up on the cash register, and she just gets ready to hit, total. And Mark says, well, are you not going to pay for that dessert you had? And she looked up and she said, you had a dessert? And I went, yeah. And she, like, and charged me $3 or $4 more.
Right.
And Mark just, he died of laughing because of that.
Right, because it was his dessert. He didn't want
I
it.
hadn't got the dessert or nothing else. He'd given it to me. But everybody's always trying to get each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that camaraderie, when you work together. Was there any times that you came close to getting hurt?
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah. One time I actually got my hip broke.
Ow.
Yeah. We had this guy that had escaped from a mental institution out at Broughton, and he was Cherokee County's prisoner. That's not the right word for it. But they committed him. He was their commitment. He had escaped, and they got word that he escaped, and they called us and told us where he'd be going. They talked to somebody that had told them. And so I went out on 69. They told what he'd be driving. And so I stopped the car there just right when you get to 64. And they said he'd either run or fight, and he'd be a passenger. And so just as soon as they stopped and I stopped, I jumped out of the car and run up to the passenger door to keep him from getting out. And he didn't try to fight or nothing, and so I handcuffed him in front and walked him back to my patrol car, and I didn't have a cage, and I set him down in the front seat, handcuffed in front, which was crazy. But back then was a different time, and we did
definitely.
things differently.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't have been handcuffed at all.
Right.
But I did handcuff him. And we were going down the road, and he started to grab the steering wheel and run us into a tractor and trailer. I found out later on that we were meeting. He didn't do that. He backed out. I seen him jerk his hands up, and then he put them back down in his lap. And I thought about him doing it, but I just kind of didn't listen to my intuition.
Right.
And so when I got to the Cherokee County line, there was a deputy there waiting, and it was raining, and he grabbed the steering wheel and locked his arms, and I was hitting him trying to get his arms off the steering wheel, and we ran off the road and hit a tree.
Oh.
And totaled my car and broke my hip and broke his back.
Oh, wow.
So, and then I had several instances where guns were pulled on me, and several instances, that I found out where one incident in particular, these juveniles had escaped. They were over at Franklin in a juvenile lockup, and they had escaped and come to Clay County, and this house that was abandoned, I was searching it. We had the rescue squad helping us hunt them. And Paul Swanson was with me, and we went around this house, and the window was broken out. And I told Paul, I said, I'm going to go in that house and see if they're in there. And so I crawled through the window, and there's this bedroom door that's closed, and I open it, and both kids are laying in bed, covered up to their neck, and there's a gun in the floor. And one was like 10 years old or 11, and one was around 12. And the younger kid told me that the other kid was going to shoot me when I opened the door, and he talked him out of it and talked him into putting his gun in the floor.
Wow.
And, there's no telling how many times that I was in that much danger and didn't know it, and just nothing happened. People
Right.
backed out or whatever. You just never know. And so, I was in a lot of situations like that, where people could have been violent, and I could have got hurt, but I didn't. Never got shot, never had to shoot nobody, so I was lucky there.
Yeah, it takes. I can't even imagine the courage. I don't believe I would be brave enough to be a sheriff's deputy at all because I would always be thinking of the worst case scenario, and have myself all riled up. But it's got to take some courage. But I think in the training they probably cover a lot of different ways for you to handle situations to keep yourself safe, right, in the community.
Well, ours wasn't that much. I don't, as I remember. You do go through protocols, and the teachers will give you various situations, and tell you
And
what
like you
did
say,
wrong.
this was how many years ago? You've been
1984.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
sure the protocols have changed since then.
Well, and the class that I went through, they had doubled the hours. Previous to that, it was 200 hours, and they'd more than doubled. Like say, when I went through, it was 440. Is what it was, and now it's 600 and something, I think.
Okay. Once the population gets bigger, then your chances of crime gets higher also. So.
Well,
Totally
used to, like I say, when you had crime happening, you most of the time knew who did it, and knew them and their families and stuff like that. And now it's just not like that.
Yeah.
You may have people now breaking into houses on Brasstown, and a different set breaking into houses on Tuscaloosa or Shooting Creek.
Yeah, because this used to be quite the everybody knew everybody town,
Yeah,
right?
It was, yeah.
And not so much anymore.
Everybody's kin in one way or another.
Right?
Yeah.
Related.
Yeah. So
Not so
that's
much anymore.
changed.
Well, what else you want to talk to us about?
Well, Doris Waters was our first investigator. He was a road officer, and Tony made him the investigator, and he was the investigator for I don't know how long before he retired. And then when he left, Mike Irondale took over for him. And then before Tony left, we got a drug task force, and they were working Clay, Cherokee, and Macon County. And so we had a task force. It was a federal grant, and so it paid for that. And they were catching a lot of people that was selling drugs and stuff like that.
So you've been retired for how long?
I retired in 2015, and Vic Davis, who was the sheriff, I was his captain. Vic asked me if I wanted to come back and do property crimes and work part-time. I could do that, and it didn't mess with my retirement or nothing like that. And so I always missed it. I still miss it. I wish I was back there right now.
Do you?
Yeah. But I came back and I worked 2 days a week doing property crimes and was very successful at it and loved doing it. I love catching those thieves too. But did that until probably about 2022 or something like that. And then, the new guys, I was a lot older than them. I just didn't fit in with them. It wasn't the camaraderie like I was
Like
used to.
you was used to, yeah.
Yeah, and it just got to where it wasn't fun, because things had changed and I didn't change with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's we don't like change. Humans,
Yeah.
As a rule, don't really lean into change. We want it
Yeah.
to stay just like it was.
Yeah.
But time marches on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, after Tony left, Joe Shook became sheriff, and he wanted me to be an investigator, and I really didn't want it. I liked being a road officer, and so he said, "Well, you ain't got no choice." He said, "I ain't got nobody else that can do it. You do it, and after 6 months, if you don't like it, I'll put you back on the road, and I'll find somebody." And so after 6 months, I didn't like it. And I told him I didn't like it. He said, "Well, too bad. That's where you're going to stay."
He just kept you there anyway.
Yeah. And so, I got to where I did like it. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't have wanted to have went back to the road. I liked investigating and the freedom that it had, because if I woke up and, you know, there's some crime that I needed to go to Gainesville for. I didn't have to try to get somebody else to do my job as a patrol officer while I was
Right.
going to Gainesville. I could just go to Gainesville,
Right.
you know, and I caught a lot of thieves by check pawn shops. You know,
Right.
I'd just pick out a place and go check pawn shops, you know, if I didn't have a lead on the crime. And a lot of times, you know, it would give you leads on crimes. And that was a valuable tool too. But after Joe left, Vic Davis was elected, and I was still an investigator. And he came to me one day and wanted to know if I wanted to be his captain, which really was chief deputy.
Right.
But he didn't want that. He didn't want me to have that title or anybody else. And so he made me captain. And basically, I was just over the patrol officers, not the investigators. And our chief detention officer, he got sick and had to be out, so Vic put me over the jail too while he was out. But mostly, I was just over the patrol officers, and then Todd Wingate was the chief investigator. And so he was over that department. I wasn't Todd's boss, and he wasn't my boss.
You're right.
Yeah. Most of the time at the sheriff's department, up until Tony, all the time, Tony was the only boss I had, and I didn't have nobody. I wasn't nobody else's boss. You know, he's the only one I had to answer to. And I liked that. It worked good. Tony never had a chief deputy. He never had rank in the department or nothing else, you know. Other than Audrey Shelton was his chief jailer. But she's really the only one that had any rank there at the sheriff's department. And she was over the jailers, but everybody else just, you know, worked for Tony. And if something happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, he was listening to the radio, and it'd wake him up, and he'd call in and take over, you know, tell everybody what to do, what he wanted them to do.
Right. Well, that's a lot of years of your life that you dedicated to the safety of the community, and I'm sure I'm not alone in my thanks for
Well,
you.
thank you.
We appreciate our first responders and our police officers, our fire department, and I don't know where we would be without people like you that have the
Well,
courage and the heart about.
It's not a job if you enjoy it.
Right?
And I enjoyed 90+% of it.
Yeah.
It's not a job if you enjoy it. No.
Yeah, it makes it easy to get out of bed in the morning
It
when you
does.
like what you're doing.
For most of those years, I never got up dreading to come to work, you know, and I'd stay 2 or 3 hours a lot of times after work just because something was going on. Or we didn't have any computers, not even a typewriter when I came to work at the sheriff's department.
No kidding.
We didn't. And we got a typewriter from another department. If we wanted to run a tag number, run a criminal history, enter somebody into the criminal history, into the warrants or whatever, we would have to call Cherokee County, and they did it.
Huh.
Yeah, and we didn't even get that until probably about 88 or 90, somewhere in there. And then we got a federal grant around 1999 or so. Philip Rickett was a deputy, and he applied for that grant, and he got it. And we got everybody laptops for the patrol cars where we could do our reports in the
Nice,
laptop.
right.
And we got a computer for the office. But when I came to work up there, the county only owned one copier for all the departments.
Wow.
I believe that's right. You know, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's right. I know we didn't have a copier.
Wow.
And the copier was in the county manager's office, and he left at 5. So if you needed to make a copy of something, you had to be there before 5. And if you needed a copy at 6, unless it was just vital, you had to wait till 8 o'clock the next morning when the county manager was in, and he wasn't in at all on Saturday or Sunday.
Right. So then it's Friday night, you're waiting till Monday.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And so finally, sometime after that, we was able to get our own copier, and all the departments got copiers. But I don't believe any departments had copiers. I believe everybody had to go to the county manager's office.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the county manager was probably glad when everybody got their own printer too.
Yeah, he was probably working to try to get everybody a printer, I guess.
Right, right. Well, Mr. Melvin, I sure appreciate you taking the time to run us through a little bit of your history. Before we go, I know that some of my viewers are going to be noticing this wonderful display of cast iron you've got behind us. So I wonder if you'd just tell us about that, because there's every size and imaginable. How did you do that?
Some years ago, I started getting interested in cast iron. My daddy was, and he had a huge cast iron collection, and it was. I never got any of those pieces, but I wasn't interested in cast iron then.
Right.
And so I got interested in cast iron, and we do 90+% of our cooking on cast iron. We don't hardly own anything else. And one piece I have that's interesting, and I don't even know where I bought this. And you see that on the bottom of it?
That bump?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was a mistake, and I started to grind it off, and I'm glad I didn't. That is what they call a gate mark.
A gate mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that pan was manufactured sometime before 1900.
Really?
And it doesn't have a maker's name, so there's no way of knowing who made it. And that pan is at least 125 years old. But it could be 225 years old or 325 years old. There's no way of knowing.
Wow.
And
What's the S for?
I don't know. I don't know.
No, hold on.
You sure can. And you know,
And
you
there's
can
a
cook
number 2.
you can cook an egg on that, and it'll slide off the floor if you're not careful.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's really seasoned.
So, you know,
good.
there's always been a debate on how to season your cast iron. How do you guys do it?
Well, what I do, every time I use this, I'll wash it. A lot of people don't think you can wash it.
Right. Some
You
people
can.
won't put it in water at all.
You
Yeah.
can. The reason people think that is because, like in the 1940s, the only soap you had was lye soap. And so if you washed it with lye soap, it did strip all the seasoning off.
I see.
You can wash it with Dawn, it won't hurt it one bit. And so that's what we do. We wash it. And then I put it on the stove and turn the heat up on low and let it sit there for 4 or 5 minutes
Till it dries?
till you can't touch it.
Okay.
And then I take either Crisco, lard, bacon grease, vegetable oil, and I wipe it in there while it's so hot you can't touch it, and it just sucks that oil in. And then I let it cool, and then I hang them back on the board. And
Do you do the bottoms also?
oh yeah, you do the whole
Top
thing.
and the bottom?
See, you do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because that'll rust too.
Yeah.
I've got one in there that I just seasoned the other day that somebody had given me. But yeah, you do the inside and the outside of them.
Well, it's good to know, because I've been in trouble for putting some people's cast iron in the sink, you know.
Well, yeah,
for
it
the
won't
tub
hurt.
water.
I mean, never put one in the dishwasher.
Right.
You know, that will strip them.
Okay.
But I just started, I just took a big interest in it, and our pans used to be stacked up in the stove and on the stove.
Right. It's nice. I like the way you've got them displayed.
There's probably 300 pounds of pans there.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Yeah, they're heavy.
And they were just stacked everywhere. And so I came up with that idea, and I got a cabinet maker to make that board. It's 4 foot
To
by
be
8
strong
foot.
enough to hold
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
and we've got, most of those are our users, and then I've got a lot that I don't use that's out in the garage. But, you know, if Kathy or I are gonna cook anything, you know, you can be standing over there at the stove and see the pan you want and walk over here and get it, and you don't
Instead
have to
of
search
bend over
through it.
and dig and dig. Yeah.
Yeah, because ours is under the cabinets and everything. And so it's just awful nice to have them on the board and be able to see it as you're walking to it and go straight to it and not have to hunt
Sure,
through a
yeah.
bunch of other pans. And that was the idea behind that. Plus, I'm proud of my cast iron collection.
And for good reason.
Yeah, Kathy loves it. you know, she's like me. She likes cooking on cast iron.
Yes, I would much rather cook on cast iron than
Yeah.
any other thing.
I feel like it's healthier.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when they've got these coatings and stuff now, and
Yeah.
non-stick and Teflon, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you touch it with a metal something, and now your whole thing
Yeah.
your whole lining is messed up.
Yeah.
But speaking of Kathy, let's talk about when you guys met, because we haven't spoke about that yet.
Well, I've known Kathy since the early '80s, and we each had other marriages, and they didn't work out, so we got together, and we've been happy ever since. This is the final one for me
Yes.
and her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then we each have kids.
So what year did you meet? Well, you said you've known each other for a long
Yeah,
time.
82 or 3.
And then
somewhere
what year did you actually get together and get married?
07.
07?
Yeah, I believe that's right.
Right?
06 or 07.
If not, you'll hear about it
Yeah.
when we get off the camera.
Yeah.
Well, it's just been a joy hearing about a little bit of history in Clay County. And again, I really want to thank you for your service. And like I said, it takes a special kind of person to have the courage to put yourself literally in the line of fire sometimes to protect those that you love and care about in your community. Is there anything else that you want to talk about today before we close it out?
Just most of the sheriffs that I work for, you know, some of them I didn't even know until they got to be sheriff, and I just got to be super good friends with them. You know, like Vic Davis. I see Vic every week, and we go out, and his wife and Kathy and I, we go eat somewhere a lot and just get out and talk about things and have a good time.
Right, so you have like lifelong friends that you've acquired through the
a funny thing Vic done to me one time. Tony Woody, when he retired, he moved to Kentucky, and Tony got cancer and was really in bad shape, and Vic and I were going to Kentucky to take Tony to the doctor in Nashville, to Vanderbilt. And so we're coming through this little town. It's a little 4-lane. It's a 4-lane, and it shouldn't have been a speed zone, and I didn't realize it, and I was speeding. And so this deputy that was running radar stops us. And he gets up to the car, and we weren't in a patrol car or nothing. We was in my personal car. He gets up to the car, and he asked me for my driver's license. And Vic looks over at him and says, "Well, I told him to slow down." And I looked over at him, and I said, "I cannot believe that you've told him that." I told him, I said, "You ain't going to believe it." I said, "But this man here, he's a sheriff, even though he don't act like one, and I'm his captain."
Right?
And I said, "We're going to Kentucky to take a retired sheriff to the doctor," and he gets to laughing. And of course, he don't give me a ticket or nothing like that, and we go on, and I told Vic, I said, "I'm just waiting for the day for you to get stopped and me be over
And you
there."
be able to pay him back for that.
Oh, I said,
I told him to slow down.
Yeah. Well, what it would be, you know, they'd get up to the window, and Vic would tell him he was a sheriff in Georgia and was a sheriff in North Carolina. And I'd head him off, and I'd say, "Now look, this man's going to tell you he used to be a sheriff in Georgia and North Carolina, and ain't a word of it true. Don't believe him." So I'm just waiting for that.
Right. Just a waiting.
Yeah.
Did you ever get the opportunity?
Not yet.
Darn it.
But it's a coming. Yeah. Way he drives, it's a coming.
Oh, shoot. There was one thing I was going to tell you about. You were talking about you had somebody escape from the mental institute. Did you have any escapees from the jail?
Yeah, we had one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of them had gotten some batteries back in the cell, and he one night about 2 o'clock in the morning, he got the jailer to open the door to get some trash out. When he did, he knocked him in the head with that. He put the batteries in a sock.
Oh.
Yeah, and knocked him in the head, and we found out he's on Pine Log, and we started searching Pine Log and finally found him. We had, you know, we did have some escapes, but most of the time, you know, it's local people. You know, you just wait them out and you catch them. You know, most of the time it wasn't people. Now that guy that knocked the jailer in the head with a sock, he wasn't from here. I don't remember where he is from, but like I say, we did get him back too.
We always got your man.
Well, usually, yeah.
Well, except for that one.
Yeah.
Does that keep you up at night thinking about that one that you couldn't solve?
Which one are you talking about?
The father and the son and the sexual abuse.
It didn't keep me up. I thought about it a lot. You know, I was satisfied I'd done everything I could do to solve it, and you know, it didn't really keep me up. I did have cases that kept me up, yeah.
Yeah.
But that one in particular that I couldn't solve, and it was really a bad child molesting, and I ended up after 2 years putting the guy in jail and getting a conviction.
2 years.
It took me 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it did.
Well, thank you for getting people like that off our street.
And that case did it. I'd go to sleep thinking about that case and wake up thinking about that case. I had a guy one time to pull a shotgun on me and aimed it at my face and rack it, and it was about 11 or 12 on Sunday night, and nobody was working but me. Everybody gone home, and I started talking to him and got the gun away from him. I sat back down in the car and called dispatch and told them to get me some help down there, that guy had a gun on me. And I started talking to him and got the gun away from him, and it wasn't even loaded.
Oh.
And I can't.
You don't know that when you're just looking at it, though, right?
I can't tell you how long. I would wake up of a night in a cold sweat, thinking about that, and thinking about what if I'd have shot him, which I'd been justified.
Right, which you've been very much so, Judge. You point a gun at someone, expect to be shot at.
I never ever wanted to take anybody's life, and you know, I'm just thankful I was able to get through my career and not have to take anybody's life. I ended up with like 39 and a half, almost 40 years with the Sheriff's Department, which is the longest, twice as long as anybody else ever done. And I've been a sworn officer with Clay County since 1984, and I'm still a sworn officer.
They could call you back up today.
Yeah, I still have a arrest
Well, thank
power.
you. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and I have I'm a sworn officer in Cherokee County too.
To this day.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I didn't realize that once you retired, you could still be called back up. So it's almost like a military
Well, most
thing.
people, a lot of people, when they retire, they don't keep their certification up, but I did.
I see.
And so when Vic wanted me to come back to work, like I say, I still sworn with him. And so all I had to do was just come back, and I don't even remember signing anything other than my timesheet.
Right.
You had to do a timesheet, and if I went back today, that's all I'd have to do is just
Walk in and clock in.
walk in and clock in. Yeah.
Wow.
When I left there, they had it where you could clock in on your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could clock in from the house and go to work and clock in that night from the house, you know, when I was finished. When I first started, you know, we just had to call in on the radio and clock in and
Right.
clock out.
I'm here, I'm on the road, or
Yeah, yeah.
I'm heading home, I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
Well, again, Melvin, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of the history of Clay County Sheriff's Office and some of the fun stories.
Yeah.
If there's anyone that you know that would like to be in one of our interviews of Let's Go to Jail. So if you know anyone that has been in jail or used to be associated with a jail or had anything to do with any of our exhibits that are in the Old Jail Museum, we certainly want to hear from you. You can email me at cchacHayesville at outlook.com. And I'll leave me your contact information, and I'll give you a call, and we'll get together, and I'll just come straight to you, or we can meet at the museum depending on what your subject is, and we'll share your story also. We're really looking for people to do that for, so please don't hesitate to email me.
Look back up. Is it too late for me to tell a story?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. We used to have a key to the old museum, the old jail museum, or the sheriff's department. It was hanging on the board, and sometimes when y'all were closed, tourists would come through and want to look at the old jail. And so, if I was there, I'd take the key and I'd take them down and I'd walk them through the old jail. And upstairs, where all the graffiti that the prisoners wrote is still there.
Yeah.
And I saw this guy's name, and it had a date on it, and I don't remember what the date was. It's probably sometime around 72 or 73 when they closed that old jail. But he was a prisoner in that jail. We had that same guy in the other jail.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Like,
when I was showing them that name, we had him in jail.
oh my gosh, cross the parking lot.
Yeah. And I just, that was a real odd story, odd thing to happen, I think.
Ironic, yeah.
Yeah, because that would have been late 90s, early 2000s when I was showing them the old jail, and this guy still was living a life of crime because we had him in jail up above.
Yeah, he apparently did not learn his lesson.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah, and I told him about it, and he remembered being in jail down there, and I don't remember what he's in jail for. It's probably drinking. Most of the time, that's what he was in jail for, was drinking and stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you remember at the old jail museum about those bars that are on the window that was cut with the hacksaw?
Yeah. I had heard about a prisoner that had gotten a hacksaw in there and filed the bars out and was able to escape. And the bars are welded back. You can see them today where they welded them back. And I can't imagine that jail, unless you were locked in the metal box, probably wouldn't have been that hard to escape. They probably let people out to wash cars and go out and sit under the tree and shoot tobacco or smoke or whatever.
Right.
I can't imagine that, especially in that day and time, that they would have kept you locked up,
No, from what I've heard, unless they were, really bad, they would have to be in that cell because the entire upstairs was, barred off.
Yeah.
So they would let them out of the inner jail square and let them walk that that horseshoe shape of the building. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you noticed that the hole in the ceiling is still there from another attempt. Mm-hmm. But that fellow that was hacksawing those bars on the window, I guess if I get the story right, some old timer was telling the younger generation and their family about him, that someone had smuggled in a hacksaw blade to him, and as she came to the museum and they found that hacksaw blade right underneath the shelf in the jail cell. I know, it's still got the little, it almost looks like cheesecloth. It's so old, the linen that was wrapped around it. But you can come see that. We've got it on a frame on the wall now, and Molly tells us that that family comes every year.
These new, I called it the new jail, the jail that replaced that one. It had bars in it.
Yeah, the one you were at was the new jail, not what the jail is today, right?
Yeah. Well, I was in the new jail today too.
Oh, were you?
Yeah. But and it don't have any bars in it until we put some in it. We did put some in it, but the jail that I worked out of mostly, it was all bars, And it was my understanding that they were hacksaw proof. If you took a hacksaw and sawed through the bar, inside the bar was a roller bar. And so when you hit it with a hacksaw, it would just roll and wouldn't cut.
Well, that's smart.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the way around hacksaws. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I was told that.
That'd be really smart.
The roller bars on the inside of the bar. The new jail is just two huge rooms that house the females and the males.
All
And-
in general population together?
Yeah, yeah.
I see.
And you can lock them into the cells individually. And then we had 3 or 4 other places you could keep people too, you know. We had where you could segregate them. You know, if you had somebody too young that you couldn't put with the males or females, either one,
Yeah.
overnight,
Too
they
young.
had to be segregated
Mhm.
from them. And, you know, just different places.
Yeah,
you
you
know.
not want to put a 16-year-old or 18-year-old kid in
Mhm.
with some hardened 40-year-olds or whatever.
Well, they've changed those laws since I got out. Up until I retired, anybody 16 years old to 18 would be charged as an adult.
Would be
period.
in with the others anyway.
No, of a night you separate them.
Okay.
You
in the
still
evening.
separate them of a night, but you can put
But the
them with
charge
them
is
all day.
still is like an adult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they've changed that now. From 16 to 18, they're charged as juveniles.
I see.
You know, they changed that, and I don't think it's good that they did, but they did. So.
So it's been really great talking to you today. I want to thank you again, and I want to tell you all a few things about our website. You can go find us at Clay History Arts NC. That's ClayHistoryArtsNC.org, and click on the corresponding tab to find all of our membership and donations pages. There's a PayPal code on there now, or you can scan your phone, take your phone and scan the QR code. It'd be an easy way if you'd like to donate $1 or $3. We had our other video series that we've done, the one-on-one with Clay County history, the sneak peeks, the artist spotlights. Those are all on there. But I want to take your attention to the events page, because first weekend in April, we're going to have an event at the Beal Center, and it'll be titled An Evening of Cherokee History. We have 4 phenomenal speakers coming to talk to you. It's going to be Derry Wood, Davy Arch, David Moore, and Rob Tiger. I believe that's the 4 speakers we'll have that evening. Stay tuned and I'll get you some more details on that. I want to remind you that we are in the process right now of our photography contest, and that's titled People, Places, and Things Unique to Clay County, North Carolina. And so you cannot edit your photo once it leaves the camera. You can use a filter or your f-stop. All your settings can be however you like, but once you've taken the picture, it cannot be edited. In other words, you can't take it and put it in Photoshop and add a cloud or something like that. So just so you know. The final day to submit your prints to Prints Plus will be Monday, April 21st. By 4 p.m. and that'll be the cutoff date. But you walk in there and just talk to one of the staff members there, and they'll show you how to sign your name up, and they'll assign you a number that will be for your print. So just so you know, all the people that submit photos will be on display for the season of 2025 in our Old Jail Museum front room exhibit. The cost for that, instead of having an entry fee, you just pay to have Prints Plus mat and frame your photo. And that's a little under $15, so pretty inexpensive there. I also want to remind you that coming up in May on the 24th, we're having our 50th birthday grand reopening celebration at the Old Jail Museum. That is 21 Davis Loop, just off the square of Hayesville, North Carolina. And more details are coming about that. We're going to have some speakers and some new exhibits opening this year. So we're really excited about hearing about that. We just want to thank you again for tuning in today and hearing Mr. Melvin tell his stories about our Clay County Sheriff's Office. And we appreciate everyone on the force and all of our first responders. But thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next one.